Teacher mocks black boy over NASA. Claim, freezes when his dad walks in. NASA doesn't hire people like your dad, Marcus. Let's not waste the class's time. The words landed like a slap, echoing across the quiet classroom. 25 pairs of eyes turned toward Marcus Green, who stood frozen at the front of the room. His fingers clenched the sides of a colorful trifold board, proudly labeled, "My Dad, the Astronaut." For a moment, all the air left the room. It was supposed to be the best day of his life. Career Day at Maplewood Elementary had always been a big deal. Parents in suits, uniforms, scrubs, or hard hats parading into classrooms, sharing stories of what they did for a living. Marcus had waited 2 years to be old enough to present. This was his chance to share something real, something extraordinary. But the words from Mrs. Flannery, his 5th-grade teacher, cut deeper than anything he'd ever heard. He looked at her, trying to understand. Her expression was half smile, half smirk, the kind of look adults use when they think kids won't notice the condescension. Her cardigan was buttoned too tight. Her pearl earrings swung slightly as she turned toward the class, already moving on. He hadn't even finished his second sentence. "My dad's name is Christopher Green," Marcus had started, voice trembling just a little. "He's an aerospace engineer and part of NASA's Artemis training program. He's working toward becoming a mission specialist for the next phase of the moon missions." And that was when it happened. The moment Mrs. Flannery interrupted, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Let's stick to real jobs today, okay? We all want to be astronauts, Marcus." Laughter bubbled up from a few students in the back, nervous, unsure. One kid muttered, "Dude's making stuff up." Another chuckled, "Maybe next he'll say his dad's on Mars." Marcus stood there, hands gripping the edge of his board like it might hold him upright. "But it's true," he said quietly. "I can show you." "I think that's enough," Mrs. Flannery said with finality, her voice rising just slightly. "Thank you, Marcus. You may take your seat." The sting in her tone told him not to argue. The dismissal was sharp, definitive. Just like that, everything he'd prepared, all the pride he felt, collapsed into a hollow pit in his chest. He walked back to his desk without a word, face burning. He didn't cry. Not yet. He wouldn't give them that. But his heart beat too fast and his hands shook beneath the table. After class, no one spoke to him. Not out of cruelty, but discomfort. That kind of silence could break a person. He sat alone at lunch. His best friend Sam, usually the first to share his peanut butter and jelly, avoided eye contact. The story had already spread. The boy who said his dad worked for NASA, the liar. When he got home that afternoon, his mom knew something was wrong the moment he walked through the door. "Hey, baby," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "How was Career Day?" Marcus dropped his backpack by the stairs. "Fine," he muttered. He headed straight upstairs, not waiting for the follow-up. His father, still in his work hoodie that read NASA JPL, was on a video call in the den, discussing something about engine cooling protocols. Marcus didn't say a word to him either. Not yet. He didn't know how to explain what had happened. He didn't want to see the look on his dad's face. It wasn't until dinner that everything unraveled. They sat at the table. His mom had made baked chicken and rice, and his dad asked casually, "So, did they like your presentation?" Marcus stabbed a carrot with his fork. "I didn't really finish it." His parents exchanged a glance. "Why not?" his dad asked. Marcus shrugged. "Mrs. Flannery said it wasn't real. She told me to sit down." There was a pause. "What do you mean, not real?" his mom asked, voice sharp. "She said NASA doesn't hire people like you," Marcus said quietly. "She said I was making it up." His father slowly set down his fork. "What exactly did she say?" Marcus repeated it, word for word. His mother's face went stone cold. His dad didn't move for a long time. "That's not just disrespect," his mom said finally. "That's erasure." His dad exhaled through his nose. "And it's not going to stand." "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked, not sure he wanted to hear the answer. "We're going to the school," his dad said calmly, "and I'm bringing everything." That night, Marcus sat on the floor of his room, folder in his lap, photos spread around him like evidence in a courtroom. There was the picture of his dad in front of the SLS rocket simulator, another of him shaking hands with the Artemis II crew during training in Houston. There was even one of him floating weightless in a zero-G flight. He had the truth. Now he just needed someone to listen. And soon they would. Because the next time someone called him a liar, it wouldn't be just him standing in that classroom. It would be his father, too. Marcus didn't sleep much that night. He tossed beneath his sheets, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling that now felt lower than ever. The shame from earlier in class had twisted into something heavier, something darker. He had told the truth. So why did it feel like the world had treated him like a liar? Downstairs, muffled voices drifted up through the floor. His parents were still talking, but not like usual. There was tension in their tones, clipped and sharp. His mom's voice had that edge she used when she was trying to stay calm, but was 2 seconds from snapping. His dad was quieter, measured, but every word he said sounded loaded, like a man calculating something carefully, like a man ready to act. At breakfast the next morning, the energy in the room had changed. His mom moved quickly, pouring orange juice with precision, her lips tight. His dad, dressed in business casual instead of his usual work hoodie, sat at the table with his NASA badge clipped to his collar. A laptop sat open beside him, an email draft visible on the screen. "You sure you're okay with this?" Marcus asked, hesitantly poking at a slice of toast. His dad looked up. "You stood up for me yesterday. You stood up for us. Now it's my turn." "What are you going to say to her?" "The truth," his father said, "and I'm going to say it to the principal, too." "Chris," his mom added, "don't go in there trying to be nice about this. She didn't just doubt him. She humiliated him. In front of the whole class." His dad nodded. "I know. And that's why I'm bringing receipts." He reached into a folder on the table and pulled out a printed letter from the Johnson Space Center confirming his position on the Artemis program. Beneath it was a signed commendation from his department lead, a laminated badge, a press photo from the NASA website, and then at the bottom a printout of an article titled "Meet the Engineers Behind Artemis II." His name was second in the list. Marcus blinked. "You kept all of that?" His dad smiled. "I work in systems engineering, son. Backup documentation is part of the job." At school, Marcus walked the halls slower than usual, not because he was nervous, but because, for once, he wasn't in a hurry to disappear. Something had shifted overnight, not in the world outside, but inside him. His father's calm determination, the stack of undeniable proof, and his mother's unflinching support gave him something he hadn't had in days: grounding. Still, the whispers started the moment he stepped into class. "That's the kid who made up the NASA story," someone muttered as he passed. "Bet his dad works at Burger King," another snickered. He ignored it. Mrs. Flannery stood at the front of the classroom, same pearl earrings, same neat cardigan, as if yesterday hadn't shaken anything loose inside her. But something in her posture shifted when she saw him. Her smile tightened. Her eyes flicked away fast. She knew, or at least she suspected. Marcus sat down quietly, not even bothering to unpack his notebook. His gaze stayed forward, eyes fixed on the whiteboard as she began a lesson on geography. But he wasn't thinking about state capitals or rivers. He was replaying every second of what had happened, the way she looked at him like he was silly for dreaming. The laughter of kids who didn't even know him. The silence afterward. At recess, Sam approached cautiously. He hadn't said a word to Marcus since career day. "You really weren't lying?" he asked, barely meeting Marcus's eyes. "Nope." "Your dad really works for NASA?" "Yep." "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Marcus turned to him, tone flat. "Because no one wanted to listen." Sam nodded slowly, then mumbled, "Sorry," before jogging off. By the time the final bell rang, Marcus's stomach was in knots. He knew the meeting was scheduled for after school. He'd begged his parents not to make it worse, not to cause a scene, but something told him this wasn't the kind of problem you could solve quietly. He lingered by his locker, fingers tapping against the cool metal as he watched other kids head toward the buses. Just as he zipped his bag, he saw it. His dad walking down the hallway, flanked by the principal, Ms. Keating. His mom was a few steps behind, carrying the now well-worn folder like it was a legal brief. The moment was surreal. Kids slowed their steps. A few turned. Someone whispered, "Wait, is that him? The astronaut?" But what struck Marcus most wasn't the attention. It was Mrs. Flannery's face as she stepped out of her classroom. For the first time, she didn't have the upper hand. The moment she locked eyes with Mr. Green, something flickered in her expression. Recognition, disbelief, then slow-burning panic. Mr. Green extended his hand calmly. "Mrs. Flannery," he said, "I'm Christopher Green." Marcus's father, Mrs. Flannery, took his hand but barely squeezed. Her voice came out smaller than usual. "Mr. Green, thank you for coming." "We won't take too much of your time," Ms. Keating cut in, motioning them all toward the conference room. Marcus couldn't hear what happened inside. He could only imagine. But later that evening, when his parents came home, they were silent for a long time. His mom went straight to the kitchen. His dad stood in the hallway, removing his badge, and then looked at Marcus. "She apologized," he said. Marcus blinked. "She did?" "In front of the principal, and she's going to do it again." "In class? No way." His dad smiled. "Oh yeah, and guess what else? I'm coming in Friday to give a full talk, NASA slide deck and all. It's been approved." Marcus's heart skipped. "Seriously?" "Seriously, she can't undo what happened, but now she has to stand there while we rewrite the ending." And suddenly, for the first time since career day, Marcus felt the fire return in his chest. Not just pride, not just justice. Hope. Because sometimes the truth needs more than just a voice. Sometimes it needs a witness. And this time the whole school was going to see it. The next morning started like any other. Cold cereal, quiet chewing, the kitchen clock ticking too loudly. But for Marcus, every second stretched like elastic, tighter and tighter as the weight of what was coming pressed down on him. Friday. His father was coming to speak to the class. Mrs. Flannery was going to issue a public apology. In theory, it should have been everything Marcus had hoped for, but all he could feel was dread. "You okay?" his mom asked, watching him stir soggy cereal that he hadn't taken a single bite of. "I don't know," he said honestly. "What if it just makes things worse?" His dad, buttering toast at the counter, didn't look up when he replied, "Son, the only thing worse than the truth being ignored is letting them stay comfortable with the lie." That sat heavy on Marcus's shoulders all the way to school. He stepped off the bus with his backpack feeling like it held bricks instead of books. In class, the atmosphere buzzed with a kind of confused anticipation. Kids whispered as soon as he walked in, their eyes darting toward him and then away. Mrs. Flannery didn't make eye contact. She seemed jittery, fidgeting with her clipboard, checking the clock every few seconds. For once, she didn't have the same rehearsed air of control. It was like watching a statue crack under pressure. Just before the morning bell, the intercom buzzed. "Attention students, Today, during first period, we'll be welcoming a special guest speaker to Mrs. Flannery's homeroom. Please give your full attention and respect. Thank you. The room exploded into hushed speculation. Is that your dad? Someone whispered behind Marcus. I heard he works with astronauts. Bet he's gonna lie just like his kid. Marcus clenched his jaw, but he didn't turn around. A few minutes later, the door opened. The room fell into dead silence. Mr. Green stepped in, calm and collected, holding a sleek presentation folder under one arm. He wore a navy button-down shirt, slacks, and a NASA badge that caught the fluorescent lights. His expression was relaxed, but his eyes scanned the room like someone who was used to commanding mission briefings, not classrooms full of 10-year-olds. Behind him, the principal followed, and then, slowly, Mrs. Flannery stood. She cleared her throat, but the first words caught. She tried again, voice softer than Marcus had ever heard it. Class, before we begin today's presentation, I want to say something important. The silence in the room was heavy. Even Colin, the loudest kid in class, sat completely still. Last week, during career day, I made a mistake, a serious one. When Marcus shared about his father's job, I dismissed his words without verifying them, without giving him the respect he deserved. I assumed, and in doing so, I sent the wrong message to all of you, that some dreams sound too big for certain people, that some truths don't fit the mold. I was wrong, and I am very sorry. Marcus stared at her, searching her face for any trace of sarcasm or performance. But for the first time she looked humbled. Then she turned toward him. Marcus, I owe you a personal apology, in front of everyone. You were telling the truth, and I should have listened. The class turned toward Marcus. For a moment he didn't know what to do. Then he gave a small nod. Okay, he said quietly. She stepped aside. Mr. Green walked to the front of the class and set his materials on the desk. Good morning, he said, his voice strong but warm. My name is Christopher Green. I'm a systems engineer with NASA, currently working on the Artemis program. And yes, he smiled slightly, I'm Marcus's dad. A few kids gasped audibly. He tapped a remote, and a photo flashed onto the projector, a gleaming white rocket on the launch pad under a cobalt sky. The NASA logo was sharp and clear. I want to tell you all a story, he began, about a kid who watched the first shuttle launch on TV in 1981 and decided, right then and there, that he was going to be part of something bigger. As he spoke, the class leaned forward, even the skeptical ones. He showed them pictures of training simulations, of weightless flights, of launch sequences. He explained how he'd studied mechanical engineering, how many doors hadn't been opened to people who looked like him, and how he had to fight for every opportunity. Then came the twist. 1 week ago, he said, his tone shifting slightly, my son told you the truth. And that truth was dismissed because of how unexpected it sounded. He let the words hang there. I want every single one of you to understand this. NASA isn't a fantasy. It isn't a thing for people in movies. It's real, and it's built by people of every background, every color, from every state in this country, including right here in Ohio. A hush swept the room. Some students were visibly moved, others shifted uncomfortably. But it was when he held up his ID, with his full name and NASA credentials, that jaws dropped. Marcus wasn't lying, and the fact that we ever had to stand here to prove that's the problem, not him. Mrs. Flannery looked like she might cry. The bell rang, signaling the end of the period, but no one moved. The principal stepped in. Mr. Green has offered to speak to other classes as well, and next month we'll be hosting a science fair sponsored by the Johnson Space Center. We hope some of you will participate. Marcus felt like he was floating. After class, as the students filed out, several paused beside him. Your dad's awesome, I didn't know black people worked at NASA. Sorry, I laughed. Colin stopped by his desk, rubbing the back of his neck. Hey, man, I didn't know. I was just joking. You weren't, Marcus replied, but now you do. At lunch, Marcus sat in his usual spot, but this time 2 new kids joined him. Sam, and then Emma. They asked him questions, real ones, about space and his dad and zero gravity. He answered them all, careful but confident. That night he laid in bed with the folder back on his nightstand, this time not hidden away. The photos were still there, the schematic drawings, the Artemis flight plan. But what mattered more now wasn't the proof. It was the fact that, finally, someone listened. The truth hadn't changed. What changed was the silence around it. And that, Marcus knew, was how things start to shift. Monday morning arrived with a crispness in the air that hinted spring was just beginning to thaw the cold grip of winter. But inside Maple Hill Elementary, the heat was rising, just not from the weather. Word of Friday's presentation had spread like wildfire. By the time Marcus walked through the front doors, he was no longer invisible. A group of kids in the hallway actually moved aside to let him pass. Emma, the quiet girl from math class, offered him a timid smile. Even Colin, usually the ringleader of the lunch table hecklers, gave a small nod like he was trying to figure out if they were cool now. But Marcus wasn't interested in nods or half-hearted apologies. He had bigger things on his mind. Something about the way Mrs. Flannery had handled the aftermath still didn't sit right with him. Sure, she'd apologized in front of the class. She had let his dad speak. But it all felt like cleanup, like damage control, not accountability. She never said why she'd jumped to conclusions so fast, never said why it was easier for her to assume a black kid from Ohio couldn't be connected to NASA than to just ask a simple follow-up question. That silence spoke louder than any public apology ever could. In class, Mrs. Flannery acted as if everything had returned to normal. Her tone was chipper, her instructions clear. But beneath the surface, Marcus could tell something had shifted. She didn't call on him once. Not even when he raised his hand during science, something that had never happened before the incident. It didn't take long for Marcus to realize what was going on. She was uncomfortable. She thought distance would fix it. But he wasn't about to let her sweep things under the rug. After class, as the rest of the students filed out for recess, Marcus stayed behind. "Mrs. Flannery, can I talk to you?" She looked up from her desk, surprise flashing across her face. "Of course, Marcus," she said carefully. "I just wanted to ask you something," he began, forcing himself to keep his voice calm. "Why did you think I was lying?" She froze, her pen hovering over a stack of ungraded worksheets, her lips pressed into a thin line. I didn't think you were lying exactly," she said slowly. "I thought maybe you misunderstood what your father does." "You didn't ask," Marcus said, his tone tightening. "You didn't ask me anything. You just said it couldn't be true." Her shoulders stiffened. "I realize now that I made assumptions, and I've apologized." "I know," Marcus said, "but I don't think it's just about me. Do you ever wonder why it was easier for you to believe I was making it up?" She blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't mean for it to be about race." "But it was," Marcus said, "even if you didn't mean it. And if we don't talk about that part, then none of this changes." The room was quiet for a beat too long. Then she sighed, setting her pen down. "You're right," she admitted. "It was easier for me to believe it wasn't true because I've never seen someone who looked like you in that kind of role. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth." Marcus stared at her, unsure what to do with the honesty. It was raw, unpolished. Not the kind of confession you expect from a teacher. "I've been teaching for over 20 years, she went on, "but I've never had a student challenge me like this. Not with anger, just clarity. You made me see a blind spot I didn't even know I had." He nodded once, slowly. Thank you for saying that. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. As Marcus sat in the library during free period, the school counselor, Ms. Dorsey, approached him. "Hey, Marcus," she said, her tone light but direct. "Mind if I sit?" He shrugged. "Sure." She pulled up a chair beside him. "I heard about what happened last week, and I also heard you handled it like a champ." Marcus tilted his head. "I guess." She smiled gently. "I also heard your dad gave a pretty amazing talk. The principal said the office got emails from parents asking if he could come back." That surprised Marcus. "Really? Really? And we've been thinking, maybe it's time we start something more permanent. A science club. Maybe even bring in more guest speakers. Let kids explore stuff beyond the textbook." Marcus's eyes widened. "Like a space club?" "Could be," she said, "but I'd want someone to help shape it. A student voice. Someone who knows what it's like to feel silenced, but chose to speak up anyway." Marcus blinked. "Me? You," she said with a smile. "What do you think?" For a moment he didn't answer. He looked out the library window at the pale Ohio sky. Just beyond those clouds, he knew, was everything he'd ever dreamed of. Rockets, stars, the void of space that didn't care about skin color or zip code. Only effort, only curiosity, only courage. "I think that sounds amazing," he finally said. That night at dinner, Marcus told his parents everything. His mom, quiet through most of the meal, finally set down her fork and said, "I'm proud of you, baby." His dad nodded. "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You made people rethink how they see the world." "I was scared," Marcus admitted. His dad leaned in. "It's okay to be scared. It's not okay to let fear do the talking for you." Marcus smiled, the first real one in days. As he cleared his plate, he glanced at the folder still sitting on the kitchen counter, the one filled with images of space capsules and astronaut patches. This time he didn't feel the need to hide it. Instead, he opened it, pulled out the schematic he had drawn, and taped it to the fridge. For the first time, he wanted the whole world to see. And this time he knew they would. The day of the science club announcement came quietly, tucked into the end of the morning announcements like an afterthought. Most of the students barely noticed it. But to Marcus it rang louder than the school bell. He was seated near the back of the classroom, the same spot he'd gravitated towards since career day, where he could see everything but not always be seen. When the intercom crackled to life and mentioned the launch of a new after-school space and science club, open to all grades, meeting Wednesdays after class, he sat up a little straighter. His eyes met Mrs. Flannery's for a second. She didn't look away this time. Later that day, as the final bell rang and chairs scraped against the floor, Marcus lingered. He was still sitting at his desk, staring at the flyer Ms. Dorsey had handed out earlier, a simple sheet of paper with a starry border, an image of a telescope, and a note at the bottom that read, "Open minds welcome." He was half expecting this whole thing to quietly vanish, like so many ideas do when adults lose interest. But as the classroom emptied out, Mrs. Flannery approached him, slowly and cautiously, like someone trying not to spook a bird. "Marcus," she said, voice softer than he was used to hearing, "I hope you'll consider joining the club." He looked up. "You're helping run it?" She smiled a little. "More like staying out of the way. Ms. Dorsey asked me to support it, but I told her it needs student leadership. It needs someone who actually understands why this matters." Marcus tilted his head. "And you think that's me?" "I know that's you." There was a beat of silence. Not awkward. Just real. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll be there." The first meeting was small, 5 students. A 6th grader named Jordan, who was obsessed with Mars rovers. A 4th grader who'd brought a crumpled astronomy book from home. Matthew from Marcus's class, quiet as ever, but present. Even Colin showed up, to Marcus's surprise, standing awkwardly near the back like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to care. And then there was Mrs. Flannery, sitting at a desk off to the side, watching with her hands folded but not directing anything. Marcus was the one who stood. He didn't mean to. He hadn't planned on saying anything. But when Miss Dorsey asked if anyone wanted to start with a topic or suggestion, no one spoke. So he did. "I was thinking," Marcus said, "we could start by building a scale model of the solar system. Chalk it out on the blacktop. Maybe use string or markers to show orbit paths." Jordan lit up immediately. "Can we make the sun like a giant beach ball?" "I have one at home," Marcus said. "Dude," Colin mumbled under his breath, "this could be sick." And just like that, the club wasn't an abstract idea anymore. It was real. Every Wednesday after school they met, sometimes in the science room, sometimes out on the field. They chalked the planets into the concrete. They researched constellations. They watched videos of rocket launches. Marcus brought in old Artemis pamphlets his dad had mailed from training, and Colin, who still didn't quite know the difference between Mars and Mercury, became the group's go-to for creative naming and poster designs. Mrs. Flannery never tried to take over. She let them run it, occasionally offering a hand when they needed supplies or explaining something when asked. But mostly she listened. One afternoon, after a particularly enthusiastic meeting where the group decided to propose a stargazing night for the whole school, she caught Marcus as he was packing up. "You're a natural," she said. "At what?" he asked, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. "Leading, teaching, inspiring." He gave a quiet laugh. "That's a lot for a kid who couldn't even get his class to believe him 3 weeks ago." "That was my failure," she said, her voice low. "You just kept showing up." He didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. A few days later, Ms. Dorsey emailed Marcus's parents. The district was reviewing grant applications for STEM enrichment programs. There was a chance to secure funding for real science kits, a tabletop telescope, maybe even a guest speaker series. But the application required a student voice, a written section explaining why this club mattered. His dad printed out the form and handed it to him that night at dinner. "They want your words," he said. "Not mine. Yours." Marcus sat at the kitchen table long after his parents had gone upstairs. He stared at the empty section, then slowly began to write. He wrote about silence, about being shut down, about what it meant to feel invisible in a room where everyone was supposed to be learning. But he also wrote about what came after, about people changing, about making space, literally and figuratively, for stories like his to be heard. The final line read, "Every kid should feel like the stars are for them, too." The next week, the principal pulled Marcus aside in the hallway. "The district loved your application," she said with a smile. "We got the grant." For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then he asked, "Can we use some of it for a telescope?" "We're already ordering one." Back in class, Marcus took his usual seat. He noticed a new flyer pinned to the bulletin board. "Maple Hill Stargazing Night, hosted by the Nova Crew." Nova Crew. That's what Colin had named the club. Mrs. Flannery looked up from her desk and caught his eye. She gave him a nod. Not a teacher's nod. Not even an apology. Respect. That was new. Marcus turned back to his notebook, flipped past the pages of calculations and star charts, and began sketching a launch pad. A real one this time. And at the bottom of the page, in block letters, he wrote, "Mission just getting started." The night of the stargazing event arrived under a sky so perfectly clear it felt like the universe was giving them a sign. Not a single cloud marred the black canvas overhead. The stars blinked like secrets waiting to be shared. The school field had been transformed. Blankets and lawn chairs dotted the grass, students and their families milling about, sipping hot cocoa and pointing upward. The telescope, fresh out of its box and gleaming under the field lights, was the centerpiece, flanked by poster boards and student-made displays. Marcus stood beside it with a clipboard in one hand and a sense of quiet wonder in his chest. It wasn't just that the night had finally come. It was who had shown up. His mom was there, her arms crossed tight to keep warm, a proud grin spreading every time someone stopped to ask Marcus a question. His dad stood nearby, chatting with a few teachers, his NASA jacket drawing curious stares and respectful nods. Even Principal Green was in attendance, holding a flashlight like a staff badge, walking from display to display with the patience of someone who finally understood what this moment meant. But the surprise came when Marcus saw Mrs. Flannery helping a kindergartner adjust the telescope. She had been distant all week, quiet but present during club meetings. It was hard to read her. Sometimes he wondered if she was just trying to fade into the background so the kids could shine. Other times he wasn't sure if she still carried guilt or just didn't know how to talk to him without it getting in the way. And yet, here she was, kneeling in the grass, smiling warmly as the child gasped at the sight of Jupiter. When Marcus approached, she looked up at him, brushing dirt off her hands. "It's amazing," she said. "I never really saw the bands on Jupiter until tonight." He nodded. "That telescope's pretty powerful." "Not just the telescope," she said. "The people behind it." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. The moment settled between them like a truce. A cluster of kids gathered around one of the poster boards, Marcus's board, where he'd drawn the Artemis mission path with glowing pens and annotated each phase of the launch with fun facts. Jordan was excitedly explaining the orbital slingshot to a second grader, and Colin stood next to him, pointing out where the Orion capsule would separate. Marcus stepped in to help when one of the kids asked, "Do you think we'll ever go to Mars?" "Maybe not me," Marcus said, "but you, probably." That sparked laughter, the kind that felt honest, the kind that didn't sting. As the evening wore on, the air grew colder and the crowd began to thin. Families started packing up, tucking blankets under arms and collecting juice boxes. But the sky remained wide open, and Marcus stayed. He stood next to his dad now, the two of them staring through the telescope in turns, sharing small comments about the constellations. "This whole thing," his dad said, gesturing to the field. "You did this." Marcus shook his head. "We did." His dad smiled. "Maybe, but they're here because you believed in something, even when you were the only one." Marcus let the words sink in. He remembered that first day back in class after career day, when he couldn't even meet people's eyes, when his teacher had made him feel like a joke in front of everyone. And now people listened when he spoke. Kids raised their hands to ask him about exoplanets and heat shields. They didn't just see the NASA logo on his dad's jacket anymore. They saw him. A few minutes later, as the last cars pulled away and the principal helped carry the leftover snacks back inside, Marcus was folding up one of the club's signs when Mrs. Flannery approached again. "I wanted to thank you," she said. He paused. "For what?" "For teaching me something I should have already known, and for not letting what I said be the end of the story." Marcus didn't say anything at first. He was used to silence now, but this time it wasn't hiding pain. It was making space for something else. "I think," he finally said, "that if we stop listening, we stop learning. And if we stop learning, we never change." Mrs. Flannery swallowed hard. "You remind me why I started teaching." "You almost made me forget why I loved learning," he replied, not with anger, but with something more honest. She took a breath and nodded. "I deserved that." A gust of wind swept across the field, rattling the last plastic chairs. Marcus zipped up his hoodie and glanced back at the empty sky. You know, he added, there are some stars we'll never see with the naked eye. But they're still there, still burning. Like you, she said quietly. He gave a small smile. Maybe. As he and his dad walked back to the car, the warmth of the night lingered inside him. It wasn't just about space. It never had been. It was about being seen, being believed, and helping others find their own way to look up. Back home, he placed the event flyer on his bedroom wall, right next to the Artemis poster his dad brought back from Houston. Underneath it, in black marker, he wrote 3 simple words: Mission in Progress. The Monday after the stargazing night, something had shifted, not just in Marcus, but in the entire rhythm of Willow Creek Elementary. Hallways that had once echoed with murmurs and sidelong glances now buzzed with energy, curiosity, and something Marcus hadn't felt in weeks. Respect. It wasn't universal, not yet. A few of the kids still looked at him sideways, unsure of what to make of his transformation from NASA liar to the guy whose dad had shown up and proven it all true. But even they weren't so loud anymore. The silence they offered now wasn't judgment. It was acknowledgement. In class, Mrs. Flannery had changed too. She didn't overcorrect, didn't suddenly pretend they were best friends or pile on insincere praise. Instead, her change was subtle, but powerful. She let Marcus lead a mini-lesson on gravity during science hour. When a question came up about the moon's surface, she looked to him with a nod, letting the class know he had the floor. And when a substitute teacher showed up midweek for math class, she left a note at the top of the instructions. If you need help with student tech setup or any space-related science context, ask Marcus Collins. He knows his stuff. But it was Thursday that brought the unexpected twist. That morning, as Marcus arrived at school, a shiny black SUV with tinted windows pulled up outside the building. He recognized the plates immediately. Government issue. His dad had explained them once during a trip to Cape Canaveral. The car idled, then shut off. The driver stepped out, tall, African-American, in a gray suit and navy tie with a NASA pin on the lapel. It wasn't Marcus's dad. Mrs. Flannery was standing at the entrance, clipboard in hand, greeting students. She froze when she saw the man approaching. He introduced himself quietly. She straightened, her posture stiffening. Marcus slowed his steps. He was just close enough to hear the words education outreach and district referral. By lunch, the news had rippled through the school. NASA had sent a representative from their Education and Inclusion Office to speak with the principal and staff about space equity programs. Apparently, someone in the district had flagged Willow Creek as a candidate for a new initiative to increase STEM visibility in underserved communities. And at the heart of that conversation, Marcus's presentation, the Space Club, the stargazing night, and the report Mr. Collins had submitted to the board weeks ago. After lunch, Marcus was called to the office. He wasn't in trouble, far from it. Mr. Reynolds, the representative, greeted him with a warm handshake and sat down across from him like he was meeting a peer. "You're the reason I'm here," he said. Marcus blinked. "Me? I read about your project, the club. Your father sent over some materials and mentioned how things started." "Oh, the presentation." "The way you kept going," Mr. Reynolds said, "after what happened. That's the part that stood out." He explained that NASA's outreach programs were looking for young ambassadors, students who could inspire others, help lead workshops, speak at panels, maybe even join virtual meetings with astronauts in training. "I know you're young," he added, "but leadership isn't about age. It's about voice. And yours has been loud enough to reach us." Marcus didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long time, he was speechless in the best way possible. When he got back to class, Mrs. Flannery didn't ask where he'd gone. But she gave him a long look, one filled with something more than just acknowledgement. That night at dinner, Marcus shared everything. His parents were stunned, then proud, then overwhelmed. "They want to put you on a mentorship track," his dad said, rereading the follow-up email. "This isn't just some cute program, son. This is real." "I know," Marcus said softly, eyes wide. His mother reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You didn't just speak up. You changed something." But the twist came the next morning. When Marcus entered the classroom, he noticed something taped to the back wall, a timeline of space exploration. It hadn't been there the day before. Beneath photos of the Apollo 11 moon landing, the Mars rover, and the Artemis 1 launch pad, there was a new section, Future Missions. In the center of that section was a Polaroid photo Mrs. Flannery had taken during the stargazing night, Marcus standing by the telescope pointing toward the stars. Above it, written in black marker, "Tomorrow's leaders start here." Marcus stared at it for a long moment, not because he needed validation, but because he realized how far things had come, how quickly silence could turn into impact, how standing his ground had led to something greater. Mrs. Flannery passed behind him, paused briefly, then said, "I thought it belonged up there." He looked over his shoulder. "Yeah, it does." There were still shadows, sure, still quiet corners where some students whispered or questioned his credibility, but they no longer had power. Marcus had learned the most powerful truth of all. When your voice carries your truth, it doesn't matter who tries to dismiss it. It will find its way. And now his was reaching farther than he ever imagined. The stars weren't just calling, they were answering. It started with a quiet knock, the kind of knock that doesn't demand attention but commands it. Marcus sat at the kitchen table Saturday morning, sketching out an idea for a mini solar system mobile for the younger grades when his dad opened the front door. Standing outside was Principal Keller, dressed in weekend jeans and a blazer, holding a manila envelope. "Hi, Mr. Collins. Sorry for the surprise visit," she said, offering a tight, polite smile. "May I come in?" Marcus watched from the hallway, heart suddenly racing. His mother, who had just stepped out of the laundry room, froze mid-step. "Of course," his dad replied, stepping aside. They all sat around the table. Principal Keller took a moment to look at Marcus, then at his parents, then back at the envelope in her lap. "I wanted to deliver this in person," she said. "I've been reviewing the entire series of events since Career Day. The district has too. It took longer than I would have liked." She pulled out a printed letter, official, district sealed. "I want to start with this," she said. "Mrs. Flannery has submitted a formal apology to Marcus, to your family, and to the district. She's also been placed on a leave of absence, pending further review." Marcus blinked. "I thought she changed," he said, confused. "She did," Principal Keller nodded. "But real change also comes with accountability. What happened can't be undone, and while she tried to correct it, it doesn't erase the harm caused. That has to be acknowledged at a systems level." His mother leaned forward, voice firm. "So, what happens now?" "Well, first," Principal Keller said, "Marcus's story has sparked something. We're launching a district-wide initiative, REAL, Representation in Education and Leadership. We want to reshape how we approach STEM learning, especially in underrepresented communities. And we want Marcus to be our first youth ambassador." His dad exhaled, stunned. "You're serious?" "Very." Principal Keller turned to Marcus. "You'd have the chance to speak at other schools, design your own project, and even attend next summer's National STEM Summit in D.C. if your family is willing." Marcus was still. His hands shook slightly under the table. Can I really do that?" "You already are," she said. That night, as the family sat in the backyard, the stars clearer than they had been in weeks, Marcus stared upward in silence. "Your world's about to get a lot bigger," his dad said. "I know," Marcus whispered, "but it already feels smaller." His mom looked at him, puzzled. "Smaller?" He smiled. "More connected, like everything's closer than it used to be." He meant the stars, the people, the purpose. The following week, Willow Creek Elementary hosted its first district assembly since the launch of the REAL initiative. Students and teachers from 5 different schools were invited to attend, and the gym buzzed with folding chairs, projector screens, and excited chatter. Principal Keller introduced Marcus, and this time, when he walked to the stage, there was no hesitation in his steps, no folder clutched like a shield, just his voice and everything behind it. "My name is Marcus Collins," he began, "and a few months ago someone told me I was lying about my dad working for NASA." Laughter rippled uncomfortably through the room. "I wasn't. He's a flight engineer. He's trained with astronauts. But this story isn't just about my dad." He paused. "It's about what happens when we assume some stories are too big for certain people to tell. About how quickly we dismiss what we don't expect, and how hard it is to believe in yourself when others don't." He looked up at the room full of students. "But the truth matters, and your truth matters, no matter who doubts you, because sometimes you just have to hold your ground long enough for the rest of the world to catch up." The room was silent. Then applause. Real applause. After the event, kids came up to shake his hand. Parents asked for photos. A few teachers asked if he could visit their classrooms. That night, back at home, Marcus opened his journal, the one labeled Mission Log Marcus 1. He flipped to a clean page and wrote, "Launch achieved." Then, just underneath, "Next objective, bring others with me." He looked out his window once more. The stars were still there, constant, patient, and now, more than ever, within reach. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of truth, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, like it, subscribe to the channel, and let us keep bringing you stories that matter, because your voice counts, and every view helps us shine a little more light. Drop a comment below. What dream are you chasing, and who told you it was too big?